we have a couple of things that we wanted to discuss. There was, now these like very casual and convenient admissions by former Biden administration officials. We have Matt Miller, people call him Count 𝐄𝐿 the former State Department spokesperson this week admitting that Israel has committed war crimes, something he was put there on the podium to deny over and over and over again for the first year and a half of this genocide. There's actually a clip of the Gray Zone's Liam Cosgrove confronting Miller at the State Department last October, 1 year into the genocide. So this was October 2024. Let's go to that clip. And then, Ali, I want you to analyze this for us.
Question for you is, we often hear in response to these concerns that, well, Putin, Khomeini, they're war criminals, they're terrorists, as if they're too inherently evil or immoral for us to negotiate with. But meanwhile, this administration has financed a genocide in Gaza for the last year, and every day you're up there denying accountability for it. So, I mean, what gives you the right to lecture other countries on their moral?
So if you have a policy question for me, I'm happy to take it. If you want to give a speech,
no, but
there are plenty of places in Washington where you can give a speech.
Yeah, but people are sick of the bullshit in here. I mean, like, it is a genocide. You are abetting it, and you are risking nuclear war in Ukraine.
So, Ali, what do you make of Matt Miller suddenly, revealing that, yes, Israel is committing war crimes when he's conveniently out of office?
Well, Nora, that clip, of course, is a throwback to the Biden administration, and I think we all got thoroughly sick of watching Matt Miller lie, deny genocide, deny war crimes, deny what everyone, including many of the journalists in that room, were seeing with their own eyes. And Miller now is out of office, and he gave an interview to Sky News on June 2nd, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen short clips of this, but I actually watched the whole thing and pulled out a few clips that I thought it's worth watching and then commenting on. So why don't we run the first clip, Tamara, and then we'll just go through them.
With Gaza, so Gaza has been such a horrific situation for so long.
I'm interested to hear you say that because, I was in so many of your briefings, and I hope you don't mind me saying this. We got the sense from you, your persona, what you were having to say as spokesman, that you didn't really care as much as some people did about what was going on. I kind of wondered at times whether you were seeing the same images that we were seeing daily. Were you?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing the same images. In some cases, we're seeing other images that you probably didn't see. I can tell you, just speaking for myself, but it's true about my colleagues in the government, the effect of that war was crushing. Crushing. To look at what was happening to children every day in that war.
So it's just, I mean, that's an admission that they knew all along, all their lies, their gaslighting, their deflection, their blaming the victims. They knew all along. He just said it there. So just hold that thought and let's go to the next clip, and then we'll have more to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it will be a secret to know that the administration did debate at times whether and when to cut off weapons to Israel. You saw us in the spring of 2024 stop the shipment of 2,000-pound bombs to Israel because we did not believe they would use those in a way that was appropriate in Gaza. And it was clear to us in that period that there was a time when our publicly discussing withholding weapons from Israel, as well as the protests on college campuses in the United States, as well as the movement of some European countries to recognize the state of Palestine, all of which appropriate discussions, appropriate decisions, protests are appropriate, but all of those things together were leading the leadership of Hamas to conclude that they didn't need to agree to a ceasefire. They just needed to hold out for a little bit longer, and they could get what they always wanted, which was Israel that was forced to stand down and Israel that was isolated, and maybe a widening of the war where Hezbollah would come in and Iran would come in. So
Wow. That's an interesting take.
Yeah, another admission there that because there were protests against the genocide, we had to keep going with the genocide because we can't reward protests against genocide by stopping genocide.
Right.
And he's continuing this lie that it was Hamas that was refusing a ceasefire, the same
Unbelievable.
lie that Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, is repeating now, and just like complete continuation of this. We spoke about that with Jeremy Scahill last week. So
Yeah.
it just goes on, and yeah. So that's another admission for the record. And then let's go back on this on some hand wringing. Let's look at the next clip where we get some more hand wringing from Matthew Miller.
Now, the thing that I look back on that I will always ask questions of myself about, and I think this is true for others in government, is in that intervening period between the end of May and the middle of January, when thousands of Palestinians were killed, innocent civilians who didn't want this war, had nothing to do with it. Was there more that we could have done to pressure the Israeli government to agree to that ceasefire?
And the answer is,
I think at times there probably was. Now it's difficult. Israel was not the only what's the right word? Not the only party to this negotiation. You saw Hamas repeatedly move the goalposts, but you saw Netanyahu move the goalposts as well. And I do think there are times that we should have been tougher on him.
Yeah. So we were saying all along, and it's not, you don't have to be a genius to say it, that they could have stopped it. And now
Yeah.
he's saying we could have done more, but of course
Right.
they could have stopped it. And there's, I don't know whether to call it conscience, but there's something there that is awakened in him that he can't live with, that all those thousands of people who were killed because he and the administration he served refused to do what they could do to stop it. They had the power to stop it and chose not to. That's what he just told us right there, to translate it into plain English. And now let's look at the final clip I've picked, and then I've got a couple of comments I want to make about Matthew Miller's ultimate responsibility here.
going on in Gaza now is a genocide?
I don't think it's a genocide, but I think I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion. You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government. The United States government had not concluded that they've committed war crimes, still have not concluded that.
But your personal view is they have.
And
they were while you were there.
But let me qualify that. There are two ways to think about the commission of war crimes. One is if the state has pursued a policy to deliberately committing war crimes or is acting reckless in a way that aids and abets war crimes. And that, I think, is an open question. I think what is almost certainly not an open question is that there have been individual incidents that have been war crimes where members of the Israeli military have committed war crimes. So ultimately, in almost every major conflict, including conflicts prosecuted by democracies, you will see individual members of the militaries commit war crimes. And the way you judge a democracy is whether they hold those people accountable.
But Israel hasn't.
That's my point.
Right.
Is we have not yet seen them hold sufficient numbers of the military accountable, and I think it's an open question whether they're going to.
I'm really struck that you think now that Israel did commit war crimes, and yet at the time, and I get why, but at the time you were at the podium and you couldn't say that. I mean, personally, that must be very difficult for you.
So the State Department itself had concluded, not in these, they didn't phrase it in these terms, but I think I did at the podium a few times, had concluded that it was likely that Israel had committed war crimes. But I do think it's almost certain that they have.
How difficult was it?
So, like, when there are modern day Nuremberg type trials one day for the genocide, the Holocaust in Gaza, will Matt Miller be culpable even if he is, kind of sort of admitting that he personally feels like Israel was indeed committing war crimes, or what what's his responsibility here, Ali?
Mm. Well, before I get to that, I think that's a critical question, Nora. I just want to point out that he's still spinning here. He's still trying to minimize. He's saying, Israel undoubtedly committed war crimes, but he's also saying, but it might have just been individuals. It wasn't necessarily the policy of the government. But remember, just a few minutes ago, we heard him say that they had delayed the shipment of the 2,000-pound bombs because they didn't think Israel was going to use them appropriately in Gaza. So that's a contradiction, because that statement about the 2,000-pound bombs is an implicit admission that they knew that it was the policy of the Israeli government to commit war crimes by using 2,000-pound bombs to attack civilians. So I just want to point out that contradiction there. But what his excuse reminded me of when he says, well, it wasn't my personal opinion, I was just doing the bidding of the government, I wasn't speaking for myself, basically I was just following orders.
Right.
And this is called the Nuremberg defense, which runs back to the post-World War II trials of Nazi war criminals. And the Nuremberg principles, which came out of those trials, are the basis of much of international law today. The Nuremberg principles are foundational to the Rome Statute, the founding charter of the International Criminal Court, which, of course, as we spoke about with 𝐓𝐡𝐞 has issued those arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, including Benjamin Netanyahu. And one of perhaps the best known of the Nuremberg principles is Nuremberg Principle 4, which we can actually show. Tamara, I hadn't highlighted it, but if it's possible to show it, we should. In any case, I'll read it out. This is, quote, "The fact that a person acted pursuant to the order of his government or of a superior does not relieve him from responsibility under international law, provided a moral choice was in fact possible to him." So the Nuremberg principle is very clear that saying I was just following orders, when you had a choice to defy those orders or to resign, means that you remain culpable if by following those orders you aided in the commission of war crimes, which Matthew Miller arguably did. And he would not be alone, because you'll remember that we've spoken in previous programs with Layla Al-Arian, the filmmaker and documentary maker from Al Jazeera, about State Department officials who helped cover up the fact that Israel was blocking humanitarian aid. And there were some officials who resigned, who made the moral choice to resign because they could not go along with these policies that they knew would facilitate and prolong this genocide. Matthew Miller, until the very last day, followed the orders to aid and abet war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And he has to deny it's a genocide, because otherwise he would be implicitly admitting that he took part in a genocide.
Right.
Unfortunately, at least in this world, at this time, Matthew Miller is not being held accountable. In a just world, he would be at least investigated for as an accessory to war crimes and genocide. But in the world we live in, he is being rewarded, and he's now a partner in the Washington lobbying firm and influence peddling firm Via Novo, where he's going to monetize his experience covering up war crimes and genocide for Israel. And you can see there the page advertising his services at Via Novo, which as part of its pitch to potential clients says, quote, "Via Novo is a strategic advisory firm for high stakes brand, policy, and crisis issues for 2 decades, we have helped some of the world's most recognized names shape public opinion and media conversation, win legislative fights and investor battles, manage crises and litigation, and expand across markets and borders. So just how disgusting,
Yeah.
immoral, and depraved is that he goes from lying to perpetuate genocide to selling his services as a so-called spokesperson to whatever unsavory corporations or governments may come to Villanovo as clients.
I mean, that's a very regular pattern that we see with former State Department, officials, government spokespeople. They go on to become, anchors at MSNBC or private sector consultants or think tank members, continuing to do in private what they did in public, just making a lot more money doing so. Always failing, lying upwards. And he's not the only colleague of, he's not the only one in the former Biden administration that is acquiring large sums of money to continue to toe the pro-genocide line. Matthew Miller's colleague, Vedant Patel, has been hired by pro-Israel lobbying firm 𝐓𝐡𝐞, as reported by the website Sludge. Do you want to talk a little bit about Vedant? Remind us of his work.
Well, you can see the image of him there on the screen. I'm going to spare us one of his a clip of any of his press conferences where he just lied outright, constantly denying Israeli crimes or justifying them or blaming the victims, the same sorts of things that Matthew Miller did for all those 15, 16 months of the Biden administration's active role in this genocide. But according to Sludge, this website, Vedant Patel, who spent much of the Biden administration defending Israel's military actions in Gaza as State Department spokesperson, has landed a new job, senior vice president at 𝐓𝐡𝐞, a Democratic consulting firm that is also a registered foreign agent for Israel. During his time at the State Department, Patel effectively served as a public defender of Israeli policy as the administration stood firmly behind Israel despite mounting casualties and global condemnation. Now at 𝐓𝐡𝐞, he joins a company explicitly hired to do the same, conducting press outreach and protecting Israel's image, only this time on Israel's payroll. And we can actually see that. I looked up 𝐓𝐡𝐞's most recent FARA filing. This is the Foreign Agents Registration Act filing that the firm has to make with the US government. And if you scroll down, Tamara, just to line 4 there, you can see that the name to line 4, you can see the name of the principal client of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Tamara, if you then scroll down to the last 2 pages of this document, you'll see that it lists the very last 2 pages all the way down. There we go. Yeah, you can just stop there. You can see this is a list of all the media organizations that this Israeli government lobbying firm has reached out to on behalf of the Israeli government. And you can see what this firm does. It reaches out to all the mainstream media we know on behalf of the Israeli government, likely putting pressure on them, spinning stories, putting forward lies. And there you see ABC, BBC, NBC, NPR, MSNBC, Wall Street Journal, you name it, they're on that list. And so Vedant Patel was just until a few months ago working officially for the United States government, and now he went immediately to working officially for the Israeli government. I mean,
incredible.
It's all this corruption, this influence peddling is all done in the open. And this is what you have to think about when they're up on these gigs with these corrupt influence peddling firms pay far more than a government salary. So actually, when they are up on that podium, lying to cover up genocide. They're actually auditioning for these jobs. When
Absolutely.
they're on the podium, that's their job interview for these lobbying firms. And what that is that they're getting paid now is blood money. You know, their salary is paid for with the blood of all those thousands of Palestinians that even Matthew Miller admitted could have been saved, could be alive today if the Biden administration had done what it could do, if the Trump administration does what it could do right now and stop this genocide.
All
John,
those media, that only covered 3 days. When you were scrolling down on that document, it would only covered 3 days. That's how much lobbying they were doing.
Right, and they have to
Wow.
file those FARA reports regularly. So if you were to look through all the FARA reports, you'd see all their activities, all their meetings on behalf of the Israeli government. So, you know, whatever the period was for that report, that's what it covers.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Just astonishing, even though it shouldn't be, because this is how the system operates. This is how it's engineered. This is how these people get to where they are. Lying and shilling for colonialism and genocide and empire, of course.